I'm Mike Morales. You are watching and listening to Sipping Off the Cuff on Tequila Aficionado Media on all of our channels and networks. I'm here in San Antonio. That gentleman out there is
Jim Johnston in Youngstown, Ohio.
Jim and I were approached by a PR company. And if you're watching this, we're taping this the day before St. Patrick's Day. First of all, you're probably, if you're lucky, you're no longer quarantined, okay? This is the day before St. Patrick's Day when most states decided to put us down on what some people are calling martial law, but they're just shutting things down to keep this coronavirus in check. So whether you're streaming us on Amazon Prime or it's later on down the line, this is the day before St. Patrick's Day. And why don't you tell people what happens in Youngstown, Ohio, normally on St. Patrick's Day?
Well, and you know, you're token Irishman here. Hello, everybody. In Youngstown, Ohio, we pack the bars. We have a parade usually the Sunday before that gets a huge crowd, and then the parade route is lined with restaurants and bars that, no matter what they are, Italian, American steakhouse, they just get filled up with people partying. And then I'm in a band called Seamus, which is the Irish name for James, right, since we're all named James. And we play, it's like the Super Bowl for us. So we play all weekend long into that Tuesday. And now because of COVID-19, we're all sitting here in quarantine, still enjoying some beverages, but doing so without the music and without the partying and without the close contact.
Right. So, you know, it was interesting. Dewar's reached out to us because what they have done is something a little bit gimmicky. It's called Ilegal Smooth. And the reason they came to us is because they know that we handle primarily, almost always, agave spirits. We have done tastings for whiskeys, Mexican whiskeys made with heirloom corn from Oaxaca. So I have a little bit of a history on whiskey, but not a whole lot. Now, Jim, on the other hand, has Dewar's programmed in his head. So this is their brand new iteration. If you're watching us right now, we are taping this. They probably within the month, they have rolled this out. Big news, big rollout, supposedly right before, St. Patrick's Day, and then this happens. Okay, but that's not going to deter us from enjoying some of this. And I'm gonna let Jim kind of walk me through it because, I don't know Scotch from Shinola. So you go.
Well, so when you drink Scotch, you're drinking either single malt Scotch, which means you have one malt, one source. That's going to be your Lafroigs, your Glenlivet, your anything where they're not taking a variety of whiskeys and blending it together. Dewar's is a blended Scotch. So the other things that fall into that category that you'd be familiar with are Johnny Walker, Chivas, those kind of things. Dewar's is a little bit, give or take, 40-ish different single malt and grain whiskeys that get blended together. And one of the things that about blended whiskey is when you have a good blended whiskey, it's coming from a lot of the single malt distilleries that Scotch drinkers will recognize, and they're getting blended together and then rested in oak. Dewar's does that with just over 40 whiskeys. They're single malt and grain-based whiskeys. The real primary one, though, is Aberfeldy, which is a Highland single malt whiskey. And Aberfeldy is a delicious, very smooth, sweet kind of heather honey whiskey. Not to say that it's sugary in any way, but it does not have the kind of smoke of an Islay malt like a Lafroig, and it does not have more of the characteristics of some of the lowland and the space side malts. It's just got a very mellow, smooth, sweet fruit flavor with a nice, that malted barley kind of complements the sweetness.
So there's no peatiness, in other words.
No. There's none at all. So if you get a Dewar's regular bottle off the shelf, you're going to have a very smooth whiskey with some fruit and maybe a little bit of vanilla and oak notes coming off the barrel that they rested in, and then a nice smooth finish. The peaty stuff you're talking about is going to be an Islay malt, Western Islands, where they actually smoke the barley mash and use peat to smoke that. But now this is in mezcal barrels.
Well,
so I think it's going to pick up a hint of smoke that's going to make this Dewar sip a little bit closer to those Islay malts that are smoky like that.
Well, now you, as far as I know, you haven't had Ilegal. We have tasted Ilegal. I can tell you that it's an 80 proof mezcal, so it's one of the first gateway mezcals that made it onto the market. So the smokiness is minimal. And I think that's really what lended itself to its popularity. Also, the owners had a bar in, if I'm not mistaken, it was Guatemala, and it was called Café No Sé. And what they would do is they would smuggle the mezcal from Mexico into Guatemala into the bar. So the bar, Ilegal, the owners themselves have very colorful histories. And I can tell you that the smoke is also minimal. So I think it was very popular. Otherwise, there was a question online that I had noticed about this when it was first presented on a press release. They wanted to know if the barrels, if it was aged in Scotland or if it was aged in Guatemala or Oaxaca.
So for this to actually be Scotch, it's got to be done in Scotland.
Exactly. Just like tequila, it has to be bottled in tequila.
So the barrels had to make their way over to Scotland.
Yes.
And this is 8 years old, so it's finished in those mezcal barrels. Typically what happens with Dewars is they take those 40 or so single malt whiskeys and grain whiskeys, they blend them, and then they go back into the barrel to rest after they've been blended out of other oak barrels where these single malts are aged. So you get all the character of these 40 plus different scotches in the barrel, blended, and then put into another barrel to rest to let those blended flavors marry a little bit. And I think that last year of finishing happened in mezcal barrels for this, because this is an 8-year-old Scotch.
It's an 8-year-old Scotch, and let's see, and finished and polishing those are terms that we use in tequila, but they're actually adopted from Scotch and from whiskey.
Right.
And so it's finished in mezcal cask for a pleasant and unexpectedly sweet, smooth blend with a wisp of smoke. And yes, it's true that the barrels had to make it to Scotland. So it is. So here, let's just, now that we've already talked about it, let's break this open. I am going to use a Glencairn. And
see, here I am without the Glencairn thinking. I said, no, I can't get the Glencairn on this. But you know what? This one is kind of the same thing as the Glencairn. Now, I will say something about that age statement that I just told you. 8 years, it is a requirement that it is the youngest whiskey in the blend is 8 years. So there's the possibility that there's older whiskey in this, but the age statement has to reflect the youngest.
See, there, and with an extra añejo, for instance, they don't necessarily have to put an age on it. We just know that in order to be an extra añejo, it has to be 3 years and over. And
they're typically not blending that.
Right. Well, with an extra añejo, they could be.
They could.
But there aren't any regulations as to how many years they're giving it. So it could very possibly be a blend of a 7-year-old and a 5-year-old, and we call it a 14-year-old. Or depending on the producer, he's got enough reserve to have stuff rested for 14. As we tasted, we tasted some of those samples: a 7-year-old, an 11-year-old, and a 14-year-old. And those were not blended; those were just what was being rested in the factory. That was before blend and before being bottled.
Well, with something like this, you can have an older whiskey, 12-year-old, 15-year-old, in very small quantities go into this and not have to sacrifice a price. If you bought an 18-year-old or 15-year-old bottle of Scotch, it's going to cost you way more than what a bottle of Dewar's would. But if it's a little proportion of that blend to get that flavor profile, they can do that. So,
okay. Well, it's a beautiful color.
yes, it is.
It's that nice, the bottle seems very clear. It may even look a little darker than most. It's got a little bit of green on the labels that may influence the color, but in the Glencairn, it's lovely legs and tears,
Yep.
very even. What would you call this color? It's a gold, isn't it?
It's almost like a honey gold color.
Okay. So walk me through. What am I smelling? What are you getting?
So, definitely smells like Scotch.
Is Scotch generally this floral or?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. You're going to pick up a lot of different notes on, especially a blended Scotch that takes a lot of different whiskeys together. Sometimes you're going to get some sweet herbal notes. You'll get some floral notes. And remember, this all comes from malted barley cereal kind of grains that give it that kind of vegetal and then earthy nose on it. But then out of the barrel, it picks up the vanilla tannins and the oak and all of those things to give it a little bit of a caramel and a honey sweetness on the nose sometimes. Scotch should always have, even the smoky Scotch, should have just a hint of that nice, sweet cereal come through.
That's what I'm getting. It's like a cereal, it's a very grainy, but on the sweet side, like you said, herbal, but a sweet herbs, like
Clover.
What was that?
Clover or heather.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah.
Now this, and I wish I should have brought in. I have a bottle of Dewar's in the other room. I want to see what the nose difference is. This definitely has Scotch characteristic to it. I'm picking up a very, very faint hint of smoke that is not typically on Dewar's.
I'm not getting any of that. To me, it's.
And I'm just noticing the difference. To me, it smells a little bit more. It's just on that, maybe one tick towards those Islay malts that have the smoke on it, but it's very, very light.
I'm enjoying the nose. Don't get me wrong. I've had stuff like Glenfiddich before. I've had this aged. It was what was it? A 15-year-old, I think, is what we had at one point, and it was very pleasant.
Yeah. And really, you don't start to get into a nose where you have a different profile than when you get over to the smoked ones or the heavily peated Scotches. All of them should have a little bit of a sweetness on the nose, just because of the characteristic of the malt.
So when you blend something like this, what they're looking for is consistency, in all aspects.
Right.
Probably not just on the nose, but so walk me through on the taste. What are we going to taste on this? What do you think we're tasting?
Well, so here's what it tells us on the tasting notes. It says subtle notes of caramel, sliced green pepper, and a wisp of smoke. When I taste Dewar's, I get kind of a light fruit, honey with a very smooth front and finish. It is Scotch. It has got an alcohol content to it. It's got a little bit of a sweetness that is not at all an unnatural sweetness. It's a very subtle sweetness. With this, I would imagine when they say that there's a green pepper note on it, that little bit of vegetalness comes from the agave that it picks up in the barrel just a touch and takes what is usually a clover, heather, honey up a little bit into a more of a floral, herby kind of profile there.
Okay. I'll buy that. Let's dive in. Let's see what we got. Wow, that's beautiful.
Ooh. Oh, wow. That is
that just exploded at mid palate, didn't it?
Dewar's at another level right there. That is.
Are you impressed?
I'm very impressed because what this and I love the peated Scotch, the peated single malts. I like that smoky flavor of those particular Scotches. Lagavulin 16 is another one. Nick Offerman's Scotch that just got released is a Lagavulin peated, smoky. You can taste that hint of smoke on this. And the thing about Highland malt, if you smoked it the same way you did those Islay malts, it would, in my opinion, ruin the flavor profile. This is just enough of a hint of smoke to take the edge off the sweetness.
Now, you know what I detected on the retronasal. That's where I got it. I got the Espadin, and now I'm tasting it more on my palate.
Yep.
As I've had like 2 small sips, and now I'm getting a little bit more of the Espadin. But you know, you're going to have to dissect it. You're going to really have to spend some time on it and let it open up for you.
Honestly, I think that Espadin is a compliment to what Dewar's typically goes for in their blend. It is. This has got a little bit of it's got a nice long finish on it.
Yeah, it does.
A little bit of a kick on the back of it, but that smoke is really. It just takes a little bit of that sweetness off of what a typical Dewar's blend tastes like. And I got to say, I'm really impressed with this as a peated Scotch lover, but as somebody who likes Dewar's and somebody who loves Mezcal, obviously, this is really, I think they just got exactly what they needed out of the barrel, the Mezcal barrel, to just kick this Scotch up to another level. I think this is phenomenal neat. I wouldn't even put ice in this.
Yeah, me neither. I thought maybe we'd need to, you know, in fact, I still have ice from our previous tasting, and I thought, well, maybe I should. But it's not necessary. This is really so approachable and sippable. And I thought, you know, when the press release came out and I saw this, and then we got approached by the folks. In fact, I should really thank them for making this happen, because they were very, very nice. Lauren Cunningham, Nike Communications is the company that reached out to us. And I thought, well, you know, because everybody is aging their beers in tequila barrels, you know, their IPAs in tequila barrels, and then they're and you know, tequila in and of itself, that's just a big round circle, man, because this barrel came the only way we can get, you know, the tequila gets used barrels is from you know, from Tennessee or from Kentucky, you know, and they're always used, and
right.
For you tequila uno drinkers and Tears of Llorona, Germán González has been known to use Scotch barrels. That was almost his go-to for the longest time. If you're an old Chinaco drinker, you know what I'm talking about. This is what he did for the longest time. But so I thought, well, this is a gimmick. I thought
this is delicious.
The more it opens
delicious.
up, you know, and I can feel it. You know, it's not initial, especially if you're not a typical Scotch drinker. I'm not. I mean, I've had very few of them, and even Jim will tell you, I got like one bourbon in the house, and I'm saving that, you know. But
this is exactly, and one of the things about Dewar's is that after the blend, that last year is not meant for that blend to pick up the rest of that barrel flavor. It's for those blends to marry together, those malts to start to marry together. So they're not really concerned that 40 whiskey blend starts to pull all that stuff out of the barrel in that short period of time. It will get a hint of that barrel back in it. But that's for those whiskeys that they chose to make that blend to start to marry. This has picked up just that 1 year hint of the Mezcal to give it a little bit of smoke that really, and I mean, this is still with me. It's still on my cheeks. It is good.
But it's Espadin. It's what
Espadin. And I think the green pepper. You think maybe the green pepper is coming?
Probably. You know, it's been a while since we've actually. I may have to revisit the video that we did for Ilegal, because it's been a while. But I know I was very impressed because the characteristics of mezcal were still there. You know, and it can be lost sometimes with a level entry or gateway mezcal, which Ilegal is. It's an 80 proof. You know, now Lisa off camera poured some of this in ice just for kicks and giggles.
Totally fine. A lot of blended Scotch drinkers like ice.
Yeah, and the nose is very different. Of course, I'm not using a Glencairn. I'm using a rocks glass.
Okay.
Oh,
opens.
It opens up, but it's not even the espadín will become more pronounced, and for me in the retronasal in the back of my palate, mid palate to the back, and then retronasal, I get that espadín. But you have to look for it, or otherwise it'll confuse you. If you're not a mezcal drinker, I don't think you'd know what to look for. I think when you demo something like this, you'd have to demo something like Ilegal, all right, a gateway mezcal, and then drink this and say this is what can happen, the union of what can happen if it's done correctly.
Yeah, and I get
that's how I would demo something like that.
That espadín is following it on the finish there. I mean, all the way to the back, that flavor is sticking with me. And I said it's sticking on my cheeks.
Yeah, right there.
You got that little bit of pepper coming through, just a little bit of bite on it, but not in any way that takes away from the smoothness of this. And you have to smoke a Maduro, I think, with this one.
Yeah, absolutely. Now this will stand up to a cigar. I agree with you completely. What do you think? Do you think as a I know it's an unusual category, but I'm saying,
are you even allowed to do this as a branded promise on Tequila Aficionado?
But you know, it's going to happen more and more often.
It is. It is. Honestly, I got to tell you, if you like Islay peated whiskeys, Irish whiskeys or scotches, this would be good. If you like mezcal, this would be a good entry into Scotch. If you just like blended Scotch, this does not go far away from the Dewar's flavor profile that's going to turn you off. I think the addition of that Mezcal espadín flavor kicks it up a little bit, that I think a real Scotch person would enjoy this.
Well, and by the same token, you know, somebody who's you and I have had our share now of mezcals.
Yep.
I'm really digging this.
Yeah.
Because I can, you know, I know how to pull that out, that characteristic. I know what it is. I know what it is I'm looking for, and it's there. So get this. What do you think would happen if they start resting this in barrels? And we haven't seen a lot of these. We've seen it in Sotol and Bacanora. What would you say if they barreled, say, a Tempestate or a Madre Couché, and then took that barrel and did something like this?
Now you're talking about bringing that little bit more of that smoke and a little bit more of that deep earth into the Scotch. But for a blended Scotch like this, I think that only enhances that flavor profile of the sweet, mild fruit, nice long finish. And for me, and I drink blended Scotch, I drink single malt from the Highlands, I drink Speyside, I drink Islay, I like them all. This is really a novel approach. I think an entry-level Scotch drinker coming from Mezcal would identify with this.
Mm-hmm.
I think a regular old Scotch drinker who tasted this could probably have a nice Mezcal next to it and pick out the profile. I really think this is a good marriage of those flavors. This is really, so what do we call this? Scotch of the year? What do we?
We're going to have to call it. We'll have to call it what it is. Is Ilegal Smooth? You know, it's Dewar's Ilegal Smooth.
Right.
That's what they're calling it. That's what we're going to call it. It's a specialized category, but I'm going to go out on a limb and say we're going to see more and more of these.
Right.
I think this was a really good I think what'll happen is companies that have mezcals in their portfolio. Let's say, what's another company that I'm thinking of off the top of my head? A big distiller. I can't think of them right now, but they have the people that maintain Montelobos, for instance.
Okay.
Okay.
Dewars is a Bacardi product.
Yeah, Dewar's is. Yeah, it's Bacardi.
And who does Bacardi have under there? Because they have.
I think Bacardi is has invested in Ilegal. They have invested a portion of it. They haven't taken the whole brand yet, but I don't see where. I think this was a really good experiment.
Yeah.
Successful, and we're going to see more of it. Okay.
Yeah.
We're just going to see the big distillers are going to do the same thing with whatever mezcal is in their portfolio. Right now, the name escapes me. It's William Grant and Sons.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah. They're going to do the Glenfiddich will be next. You watch. They'll be next. They'll be resting it in Montelobos barrels. As to my knowledge, I don't think Montelobos has they have a Reposado, I think. I've never tasted it. I have a bottle of Montelobos up there. But it's going to happen. It's going to happen because there's a lot of dovetailing going on. Let's face it, we're in the middle of an agave crisis. Tequila drinkers are wanting more out of their tequila and they're not getting it. Mezcal drinkers are beginning to experiment. The guys in whiskey they're going to come to you and they're going to say, Jim, what's the big deal on mezcal? Well, let me show you. Well, let me show you what can happen.
I've always said this about the difference in whiskey and tequila is that an agave plant is in the ground for the same amount of time that a good Scotch ages in the barrel. It takes them 1 season to grow the malt for Scotch, the barley that gets malted for Scotch, and then 8, 10, 12, 15 years in a barrel. Whereas an agave spirit spends 8, 10, 12 years in the ground, and then 3 months before it goes in the bottle. And where does that? So the Scotch shortage and the bourbon shortage is the issue of not making enough of it at a certain point in time, and they're starting to make more. But I think that as there's an agave shortage and the Scotch producers are starting to kick up, you're right. There's going to be a lot more of this.
Yeah, I foresee. Well, you know what? I'm going to call it what it is. It's a brand of promise. Dewar's Ilegal Smooth. Finished in Ilegal mezcal barrels. I know it sounds gimmicky, ladies and gentlemen, but you know what? It really delivers.
It's good.
It's really good.
It's good.
It's good. That's
good.
I don't have my little paddle here, but I think it's a brand of promise nominee, probably a winner too at this point. Because unless somebody brings me another one,
running out of posed right now. So
yeah, running out of posed. Yeah, just it could. Let's get political here. Hey, happy St. Patrick's Day, bro.
Sláinte to all my Irish friends watching.
Hey, for those of you who are quarantined, and social
pubs are closed over there, and
God bless.
God can't do that. So, alas, but
hey,
don't make it through.
Don't let it stop you. Go get yourself something. Celebrate the fact that you're healthy. That all this is going to blow over. This too shall pass, and next year we're going to be laughing about it. And and I thank you to Nike Communications for making this happen. I really appreciate that. And Ilegal Mezcal, congratulations, golf clap on that. Take us on the golf course in a flask.
Oh yeah.
But anyway, that's our take on Dewar's Ilegal Smooth. I'm Mike Morales here in San Antonio. That Irishman out there is
Jim Johnston in Youngstown, Ohio.
If you're watching us on YouTube, please subscribe. Hit that notification bell so that way every time we upload a video with Jim, Ireland turns itself on and they watch him.
Love it. I'm so happy about that too. So sláinte, everybody.
Yeah, it's cool. And again, if you're listening to us on anywhere you download your podcasts, please do so, like iTunes and Spotify. Whatever you do, tomar sabiamente.
Sip wisely.